Tonight we'll be presenting you with the opportunity to hear practice, process, and philosophy from 7 Roycroft Masters in their mediums. At the close of the conversation, the public is invited to pose questions that they may feel of interest before breaking for socializing and dinner. We are grateful for the gifts of these artisans' time and attention. So join me in welcoming our panel to this evening. We have Thomas Kegler, Master Painter. Thomas is an internationally recognized traditional oil painter inspired by the American landscape. He has been a Roycroft Master Painter since 2003, and he resides with his children here in East Aurora. And PerrySmith, Master in Clay. And PerrySmith's work focuses on both functional and sculptural form, and she takes influence from the Art Nouveau movement and a passion for studying nature. She holds a bachelor's degree in arts education and a master's degree in multidisciplinary studies with a concentration in ceramics from Buffalo State University. Anne has been a Roycroft Master for, I've lost it, a long time. A long time. She is also a past president of the Roycrofters-at-Large Association and the newest member of our incoming board. Her work was most recently featured in the Birchfield Penny Sylvia Rosen Art and Craft Media Biennial at the Birchfield Penny Art Center. Welcome Peter Potter, Master in Photography and our current president. Peter has taken influence from Rix Jennings, Charles Birchfield, and R. Crum. And in addition to his work as a photographer, he is a lecturer and educator. He's been a master since 2020 and was the first photographer to do so. He currently serves as our president. Henry Schmidt, Master Sculptor, holds a BFA in Painting and Illustration from Syracuse University and has a storied career with Fisher-Price Toys, WKBW TV, and currently works in conjunction with the Buffalo Maritime Center. He has been a Roycroft Master since 2020, I believe, and has completed commissioned work which include the 155th New York Infantry Regiment Monument and commemorate the Civil War Regiment, which was incorporated into the Naval and Servicemen's Park at the waterfront. Gerald Smith, Master in Clay, has been a master artisan since 2007. He studies both in functional pottery and sculptural pottery, and his work focuses on incorporating industrial elements left behind in the Rust Belt areas of our country, particularly along the Buffalo waterfront. His work has been shown nationally and locally, and he works out of Snyder together with his wife and fellow master artisan, Anne PerrySmith. Thomas Pafk, Master in Wood, is a master artisan. He is nationally renowned for Roycroft Renaissance custom furniture, formerly employed at Fisher-Price before establishing a freelance design practice, which eventually merged into artisan status in 1996. And he has been a master artisan since 1998. He also serves as a past president and is the current vice president of the Roycrofters-at-Large, as well as the Mark and Jury Chair and Festival Chair of the organization. And our final panelist is VanOstrand, who is a Roycroft Master Metalsmith, has a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from the University of New York at Brockport, and studied under metalsmith Thomas Armukusen, an internship at that studio. He works through the present day and is currently an art educator here in East Aurora. He has been a Roycroft artisan since 1999 and a master since 2002. He currently serves on our board as well. So welcome. So we have a wide range of topics that we could go through tonight. And I've asked the panelists to submit questions that they feel may be of interest to the larger community ahead of time, which they were provided with the opportunity to review. So I think what we could start off is a good question from Anne PerrySmith, was on training, education, and apprenticeship. So part of our organization involves mentorship, bringing up artisans to a level where they can work independently and then excel and become masters in their own right. So what was your training, education, or apprenticeship? And how do you continue to develop your skills as you move forward? And anyone from the panel that has something to share to this question.
I'm basically, I have a degree in model making, which is really obscure. I used to build scaled models for architects, developers, worked for Fisher Price right out of college. And luckily for me, my career kind of morphed into furniture making because I would build a model for like Simonelli development. And then it'd say, can you build a display stand for the model once the building was built? And then they'd say, can you build bench seating for our lobby? Can you build reception desks for the various businesses that were moving in? So without me knowing it, my career kind of morphed into furniture design. And I was lucky because basically model makers are non-existent now. They're not necessary because of 3D printers. So when it comes to furniture, I'm pretty much self-taught, but I basically feel that that's what I was meant to do. So,
is anyone else? Ron, you worked as an apprenticeship at one point. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, it was a great experience. And really, throughout my education, you missed it. I have an MFA also from RIT, School for American Crafts.
Apologies.
And in both of those environments, I had really good instructors who really kind of drove me into education myself. And I look at this as being something that's almost an obligation to kind of pass on what I've learned through those internship programs. And even now, I do workshops where those students go on, and I mean, Dave Tundo over here, he took one of our workshops at one point in time. And there's some others also. I find when you teach your craft, you really learn to master your craft. So there's a great value in any apprenticeship or internship.
And you recently retired from 25 years of arts education. Do you have any 33? Lots of numbers.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, kind of that my art teacher in high school was very communicative to all of us about, Frank Lloyd Wright and the arts and crafts movement and the Roycroft. And so as a result, when I started teaching, that was definitely something that was on the agenda of things that I wanted to make sure my students knew about and learned about. And it became a passion for me. And then after teaching for just a couple of years, I realized that there was no way that I couldn't continue to make work. And that's when I was working on getting my master's degree. And it was, do you go for art education and get your master's degree in what you just graduated from and more of the same kind of a thing? And I was like, no, I need to do something that's really going to be for me. Because like Ron said, you can't be a good teacher if you aren't making artwork. The two really go hand in hand. And, it helps you to obviously continually generate ideas, communicating with the kids, communicating with whoever your students are. So yeah, definitely really important to keep sharing and, definitely circle of life kind of a thing. Just being in shows, being in the art and craft media show at the Birchfield, I've had students that have been in the show with me, students that are internationally renowned ceramic artists now. And it's amazing. It's really gratifying. So definitely great.
So part of our organization's structure, and all of you are masters who sit on our master's jury each year. And one vital piece of our organization is the requirement of some sort of sponsorship or mentorship. So those of you joining us tonight who have actually mentored or sponsored someone who eventually obtained the mark, How do you feel that that question translates into our specific world where we actually foster talent and bring them up for a specific intent?
I think it's just a really, it's a huge component. Like if we don't obviously encourage people to make work, it's not like a competition. We want to make sure that we generate people that are creating artwork that's at the same level that we've established as being, a premier elite group, which no apologies on that. We want to make sure that people are working really, really advancing in their craft, moving forward. Otherwise, we're going to die. So the fact that things are growing, things are advancing, this is all positive to keep things going. You just
Yeah, exactly. It's fundamental in our mission. It's what we do. It's why we don't get old and die by ourselves. That day's coming. I want to go back. I want to respond. Training I received was at East Aurora High School in our excellent art department. Maybe a few years before Ron and Tom, but several here will recognize Ron Beebe's name. And he had a great program. And, that's where I learned all the fundamentals, techniques, and composition, chemistry, and darkroom techniques, which translate for me. I use those techniques and the analog techniques of techniques analogous to the darkroom techniques in the digital editing that I do. And since high school, I've been an autodidact in the process.
The second big comment on the mentoring part. I think what's really great about this group is that how approachable all of us are. And we're always open to someone who has a question, how did you do this, or how do I get better? And I think it's when you do work with somebody that has that genuine, desire to be better at what they do, I think it's invigorating for us too. I've been working with one individual, and it does give you a feeling that you're just out there just doing your own work and showing it. You're actually helping someone to get better at what they want to do, get better at what they do want to do, and I think that's one of the reasons that attracted me to the group. And again, I'll just say it again. I think everybody here, and most everybody in the group, is very approachable and willing to share what they do and how they do it.
I think another important part of that is also mentoring about crafting a business. For a lot of us, I mean, we're independent, employees and sole proprietors of our own businesses. And just a lot of friends come to me and say, how do I do this? And I said, you weren't traditionally trained as an artist, and now you're, in your mid 50s or 60s, and you want to do this. You want to craft a business, and, just share my experiences from college alley at Lewiston Art Festival or Allentown, or becoming a Roycroft artisan and doing our shows, but I'm just open to help friends, help acquaintances, or people who approach me and just say, even at our shows, how do you do this? Give them, open the door a little bit, share. And that helps increase our organization, and it helps bring more art into the world to enjoy.
So my question, as a follow-up to all of those statements, is at what point does skill stop and creativity take over? Because that's a complicated question in our world, right? Because there's that question of high craft and low art and fine art. Where does fine art and craft intersect? So any responses to that from the group?
Kind of jumping in as a painter. I don't think that ever stops. The journey of always honing your craft, taking it to another level, combining with creativity. It's a never-ending dance. It really is. Every time I'm at the easel, it's a new challenge, and it has to be solved, both technically, but it starts with the concept, and that's when that's what I love about painting is it's because I'm not working much from photographs. I'm working from memory, from studies I do in the field, and ultimately trying to bring those into a strong composition. So there's the concept, but every time I'm on that canvas, it's definitely problem solving, and that plugs into the skill development. And sometimes I'm referring to painters that I aspire to. I'm looking at Hudson River painters that perhaps were dealing with a sunset in a certain way, trying to dissect their process and how to capture that, but also, imbuing this sense of wonder within my work, which is a big part of it as well. So I love that about it. It's I don't think this skill ever ends, and then the creativity begins, at least on my end. It's always a dance between the two.
I think following up on that also, it's the challenge. I get a lot of people that come through my shop and they ask, what is your favorite piece to do? And my favorite piece to do is the one I haven't done yet. It's always the challenge, because if you get stagnant and bored with doing the same thing over and over again all the time, there's nothing like just trying to figure something out and just pushing yourself to make it happen. Yeah.
It's a common question I get too. What's your favorite painting? It's literally whatever's on my easel at that time. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. Yeah.
I had a quote that I posted in my classroom that was something to the effect of the master has failed more times than the beginner has even attempted. And I think back to, just being an undergraduate and learning how to throw on the pottery wheel and being there 24 hours a day, certainly building a community there. In essence, because it is so labor intensive what we do, being using craft materials, and just, being beaten and going home and getting up the next day and going back and finally you get it, and then being at this place now and, sharing that with your own kids in class and telling them, listen, like I said, that quote, go back to that quote. It takes this huge amount of time. And then once you've got that, then the rest becomes this easy thing to be able, easy is a relative term, easy thing to be able to do. I can pull all of those really cool elements from, just looking around the room or looking around the ground or looking around outside and pull those things incorporate into that skill that I've established that I can just do automatically without thinking now. So it is, the quote, right? The craft is so long. What is that quote? The craft so long, or the life so short, the craft so long to learn or something like that. And that is absolutely, the truth. So, encouragement definitely to people that, as Jerry said, are older doing this, that you're embracing something that's going to take some time, certainly, to get to that place. The struggle is real.
And I, on the question of skill, where the skill drop off, the skill and the creativity begins. And I think sometimes, I worked with people, even in throughout my whole career, and there is a point that you lose sight of things sometimes because you're enamored with skill. Okay? And that skill becomes paramount. And then all of a sudden, you've got this great thing that has this amazing skill, but doesn't tell a story or doesn't communicate. And at the end of the day, that essence of that little bit of communication is, I think, is the thing that you really need to makes work good. And I think it's a hard thing, because I see a lot of people's work and they are enamored with the skill level. I have to be this, has to be this way. And then they get that, but it's a very boring piece of artwork. And it doesn't have It's not communicating the story. It's not telling. If you look at painting or sculpture, there's a lot of imperfections in that stuff, but you don't see it. You never see it. What you see at the end of the day is that story. Skill is important because if you can't, you have to have that level at least to communicate what you want to do. And hopefully, as Ed says, this becomes second nature. Skill is just now there. It's pervasive in what you do. It's what you do beyond.
Yeah, I mean, it's chops and it's soul. It's like you should have chops, you should have technical skill, but beyond that, yeah, it can be too lifeless if it doesn't have the love or the soul or the heart imbued.
So I apologize in advance for subjecting you to this question, but then building on those points, which is most important, head, heart, or hands?
Easy, neither, none. It's a triumvirate. That's why Ruskin brought them forth.
Yeah, but the difference there, when you look at that head, heart, and hands, okay? I can teach you head. I can teach you hands. I can't teach you heart. So you need the three. You're right. It's a trinity of success right there. But again, I'll repeat it. I can teach you hands and I can teach you head, but I cannot teach you heart. So I think once you get to that point where you do have that head and that hands, you need to go deep into yourself now to take those two other skills or those two other mentalities and then be able to really sing what you do. I don't know if I don't know, I'm not sure who made this quote. I think it was Gauguin, but he said the difference between good and great is enormous.
Yeah, I've been teaching at the high school for 25 years, and I often say that when I see a successful student, it's often a melding of the three things we refer to as head, heart, and hand. I kind of refer to it as passion, work ethic, and skill. Of those three, to me as a teacher, the least important one is the skill, because that's the easiest to obtain by far. And when I see those students that have really been successful in the arts years after they graduated, it really was that melding of the three things.
Thank you for that. Any questions from the audience before we move on to a new topic? Well, then in building, I hear a lot about skill building and marrying those concepts of skill and creativity. And I heard Tom Kegler say specifically problem solving. So there's a lot of problem solving in art. So moving on to the question of community and collaboration. When you are working through those problem solving issues, when you're stuck, you're in crisis, you can't move something forward, who do you go to? Who do you go to? As masters in your medium, where do you find collaboration and assistance? Whether it's assistance for spirit to move the energy along or problem solving for a specific skill.
I have it easy out. We share a studio, Ann and I. So there's critiques while I'm still throwing, while I'm still sculpting, and we share a lot of back and forth. We'll take a break, a lot of sharing in that. And I think at other times during the year, just the Roycroft shows, when we get together and people come into our booths, other artisans who are in the show, you get a lot of great feedback, patrons or, viewers at a gallery, at an opening or something like that. It really, you need that. You need the public to give us feedback, and Thomas will come over and have dinner and we'll talk about a clock that's on the wall, or we'll talk about a doorknob but it's great to socialize and talk about skill and form and all those points with other artisans.
I think one of the nice things about being in an artist group or an artisan group is you get pushed by other artisans. Like I myself get pushed a lot by James. James from Mission Guild, James Miller, he has a tendency to just really reach out there, and we push each other really hard. And that's made me better over the years, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, as a teacher, I, kind of think back to, especially as a fine artist or a painter, when you're in high school, you have critiques, you get input from your peers, your teacher. When you're in college, kind of the same thing, gets a little bit more formal and maybe more intense. You're in that collaborative atmosphere. But when you become, let's say, in the professional world, it can actually get pretty lonely. You're often working in a bubble in your own studio. So the way I've kind of mitigated that is I invite some local fellow artists that come over at least once a month, and the requirement is you bring a piece of art, and we enjoy a beverage and talk about each other's art, and I relish that. Because again, working in a bubble, sometimes it's hard to assess maybe something that is a challenge, and that always comes up in these little gatherings. And we push each other in a very friendly way, but also aren't afraid to say, you need to move this in that composition, or the color's not quite right. I think that's what we want, because we need people with similar visions, kindred spirits, but also that open-mindedness.
I think that we're our worst critics in a lot of ways. Like, we're super hard on ourselves, certainly. We wouldn't be doing what we're doing if we weren't. And so that's a huge piece to it too. And I think I know that ceramics is a little unique in that it's super community oriented, from you're doing your artwork, you're making your sculptures, you're making functional ware. And then at the end, you're eating around a table, using that ware to eat from, and super shared environment. So it's fostered from when you're just starting in that way. And I am incredibly grateful that Jerry is, there. The last couple weeks, I'm like, hey, come here. Gets home from work. I'm like, what am I doing? And he's like, that's okay. And now that's thanks. That's all I need. So it's great. It's super grateful, but also just having friends, like what Tom Kegler said, that, we're having studio visits, we're doing things of that nature to, just keep a fresh eye, because certainly now we're living in a bubble to an extent. So you want other voices as well to influence what you're doing. And being a teacher, especially at a high school, if they see your work, the students, a lot of times they will just be so, oh my gosh, that's so great. And you're just, wow, that's not, you made it as an example really quick to show the kids or whatever. So, and you can inflate your ego wrongly if, it's only those voices. So you got to be careful about that too. So
the other thing is, when you look at that challenge, where is it coming? Where does that come from? I mean, is it when you do a commission and there's a certain challenge to a commission, opposed to creating a piece for yourself, or creating? I think if you're looking at things, especially what we do, is okay, I'm making this for a purpose. I'm not just making it just to make it because I want to share it with somebody else. So there's a certain degree of thinking goes into that, in terms of how marketable what I do is with what I can do here, and what decisions you make in terms of how marketable it is. And I think that's what's good about this group, because everybody does have their own little market structure on how they present what they do, and how successful or not successful it is. And I know all of us have shown things and either sell or they don't sell, or they, you get a good response from one thing or another. And then you draw from that, you try to draw each other from that. One thing that I did, and you talk about how to keep that energy going. When I worked at Fisher Price, you know, I had a department of like 20 people. Those were illustrators, designers, sculptors. And I always encouraged them to do their own work. I mean, they went to work every day and it was a high performance creative environment. And it was like every day you had to produce. You had to bring something to the party because everybody was waiting. And, but I always encouraged everybody in my department to always never stop doing their own work. Because what happens is when you do your own work, you're making those decisions and you kind of have those, you made those decisions, you live with them. When you work for somebody else or you work for an organization or a team, you're under constant critique, constant review of what you do. And believe me, when you put a passion into something and it goes into a meeting and in 5 minutes it's shot down, then where do you go from there? Like, where do I go from there? Because I got to come back next week with a solution. So it takes a lot of energy, and I think that's part of the whole thing is that we do need to market what we do, and it is important to look for that. How do you energize that, and how do you understand that? How do you utilize it?
What would you say is your biggest obstacle? Sorry, this mic is not.
It's not cooperating.
Not happy. It's not a good mic. So I'm curious. What do you think is more of an obstacle as a professional artist? As you spend a lot of time talking about work being marketable, and the reality of being a working artist is that we support ourselves with our craft. We're not just doing it on the side. This is a full-time commitment. So what's a bigger obstacle, though, as you balance that concept, the worry that it won't be well received or the worry that it won't be marketable? Because there is a difference in those two things, right?
There is, but I think you look for that balance. You got to look for that balance. And it's a matter of, like, and I think that you still do, as an artist, you're out there trying to do marketable things because this is what you need to do. But I think you also need to do that other thing that is not, it's for you, that you, like I encourage my people at Fisher Price to always do something of your own, because that's where you learn, that's where you push the envelope, okay? You could be making something that does very well in the show, all right? And it'll take you through it'll take you for a certain, but if you really want to get better, you're going to have to push that envelope a little bit. You're going to have to move that dial, and that's where it comes in on the personal level. It's like, okay, I'm pretty good at this and I can keep doing it, but I really should push that needle a little bit. And maybe it's not for the public and it's not a marketable thing and it may never get seen. And who knows? But you take from it a lot.
I've always found that the collaborative pieces pushed me to make better work. I've made a couple of goodie boxes. People in this room, Thomas, I think, was my first. And I think I just did maybe some little accents on that one. But Howard and I did the clock in there. That was a good push for me in one direction. And this latest one, I think I really pushed myself, knowing that, I had an idea that I was going to bring Tom Simonelli in on it pretty early. He was someone that I was mentoring for admission for the mark. As soon as he got the mark, I asked him to help out with that piece. And I was pushing myself a little bit on that box. Box is outside of my comfort zone. And the design was going pretty well, but I totally redesigned the entire top as soon as I saw his leather piece. Working with another artist, I think, can be something that's very good for you. I think that pushes you to do a little better. Maybe not be as experimental, but really to bring all those pieces together, your passion, your skill, and your thought of the design together, because it's not just you on the line; it's the other guy too. So
It's a bit of a Venn diagram too. You know, you can have those two lobes of it where, okay, you know, I really feel good about this, and this is drawing on my creative power and skill, but it's not going to sell. But I think you have to do that work. I think that is expression that has to be done. And, you know, that third intersection that, you know, validates it commercially is, yeah, it sells too, so that's okay. Then you can have those, you know, those other two lobes that go together. It's like, well, it sells, but it isn't really satisfying to create it.
You have to figure out a way to create both. Hander. Any questions from the audience? This is meant to be interactive. Your questions are welcome.
Can we ask them questions?
Sure. Those aren't vetted, though. We take no responsibility for liability. So here's a question. You're all masters. You know what you're doing. So what was the biggest mistake you've made in your art practice, a piece of work that still sticks with you, if you have one? And how did that change the way you approached creation? Did it change you in a way that kind of altered the way you work?
Did you talk like today or this week? My studio.
There has to be, if there's one that sticks out, or if you have a thought to share along that vein, because we all know that happens more than we like to admit.
I don't make you guys make any mistakes. I don't make.
Well, you're an master. You don't make mistakes.
Maybe like building upon that question, again, as a teacher, I commented to a student today. It said, more amazing pieces of art have not been made because they've been abandoned. And I think that inner judgment we all have as artists, putting yourselves on the line, it's not exactly answer your question, but one of the stumbling blocks, if you will, instead of saying mistakes, is that we give up too early, thinking it's not good enough, when most of the time our work is really, it's a great start, but it needs to be pushed and not abandoned too early. If the concept is good, maybe you don't have the skill yet. Maybe it goes on the back burner for a year or two when you come back to that project. But I think that's it. Maybe I can repackage that and say, what's advice for somebody? Like, maybe that's where you're going with the question, you know, what are mistakes we've made? It's just pushing through it. Follow your passion. It comes back to that passion thing. The skill will come. And just, yeah, I'm not sure I quite addressed the question as you asked, but
Questions are meant to be prompts. So whatever you bring to the table is fine.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me as though the biggest mistake would be a lack of perseverance.
or just being like Anne said, being too hard on yourself. You should, as an artist, always be questioning and maybe critical of your work, but not to the point where it's being a detriment to your art making.
I don't think it's much like when you say mistake. What I make is it a waste of time? Then I did this and it was a mistake. But I'll give you some insight into doing public art. Because once it's out there, it's out there. And you walk by it and you can say, ooh, and I've got a couple of, pieces out there. They're in bronze and they're out there. And every time I go by it, I kind of do a little of this, like I would have done this so much better now than I did then. So I think that's, but I wouldn't consider that a mistake. It's not a mistake because you did what you did at the time, but it's a reflection. And you do, and like I said, I look at the piece and I go, okay, let's move along. But you'll find that, especially in public, something that's going to go up and it's going to be in the public for a long time. So that's always an interesting experience.
Yeah, look, the piece in my head that you can't see is way better than the one you actually like or purchased from me. You know, like I was, 1,000 times better than that, but you really like the thing I just presented you. That's awesome. So that happens sometimes. We don't quite get it all out at the level we thought we would do. So that's not really a mistake, but I think it's okay, you accept it. It communicates well, but is it, which part of the Venn diagram or the head, the heart, and the hand, is the mix quite right? And it's like, no, but it's 88% right, and it's out there.
And one thing I always loved was Isamu Noguchi was a model, a sculptor, modern work. When he got a commission, he always did 2 pieces, and he kept the best one.
Yeah.
Yeah, he always did 2 pieces on the commission. Kept it.
Which is,
And we're all in the museum in outside. And that's another thing. When you do something, we talk about a mistake. Is like you do something that you really didn't like, and you don't want to let go. I think that's an even harder for is to say, oh, geez, I never make this again, or I really like it and I don't want to let it go. And that can be an issue as well on the other end.
I'm constantly doing that. I'm always doing 2 pieces, 2 of everything. That way you got one that you can put in the gallery, one that you can experiment with, one that if you screw up the one you're working on, you can give the good one to the client. So, I mean, it's a good practice.
I feel bad for sometimes dating my work as a potter. You scratch your name on the bottom, the date. So at a recent show, yes, there was a piece there from 1995 because I loved it for 30 years. And then I didn't love it so much, so I brought it to the show and see if it would sell. So sometimes that happens too, where you make a piece and it really speaks to you and you outgrow it, but it still could speak to others and it could, still have a life somewhere. So maybe that gets back to elevating craft versus fine art versus I sculpt for myself, but I make pots for you.
So, as we are here in the Roycroft Inn, and you are Roycroft Renaissance Masters, one of the things that we have this huge preponderance of legacy, that what it means to be a Roycroft artisan working in wood or sculpture or clay or metal and painting. So how do you balance, specifically, I'm thinking of our exhibit last year where we specifically chose pieces that were outside of the standard canon of Roycroft to show the evolution that the movement is underpinned by skill. So how do you address, because several of you are more sculptural, modern sculptors that aren't necessarily working in the traditional Roycroft style. How do you balance the legacy of the movement with evolution in your personal style?
I think it's you're carrying the legacy on. I mean, again, that whole part. If you're going to do pieces, if you're working in sculpture or clay, in wood or clay, I mean, you're still bringing that sense of accessibility to what you want to do. All right, because the Roycroft was very accessible. The kind of crafts that we're going out here, and the emphasis on that innovation that went on here and in a craft. So I think that carries through what you do. It doesn't necessarily have to look like it has all those elements of pure Roycroft, okay, in terms of how the design and form works, but you still have the essence of that Roycroft in what you do, okay? And you might find little bits and pieces of that, worked into what you do. But I don't think that's in my opinion. That's just my opinion. And I'm always saying that, the movement itself had that sense of initiative, had that sense of innovation and skill. And innovation and skill doesn't mean you do it this way. It means you do it your way and you explore out that way. So I think you can have the spirit of it, not necessarily the exact reproduction of it.
I agree with that. I get asked a lot as Mark Jury chairman, do you have to work in the arts and crafts style to be a Roycroft artisan? Absolutely not. It's really about the quality of your work and the vision that you have. It doesn't have to be Roycroft. It doesn't have to be arts and crafts. We take a lot of ideals from the arts and crafts movement, and we do make things with our hands and head, heart, and hand and all that stuff. But again, it doesn't have to be one strict style. It can be anything as long as it's of good quality.
I always think the most interesting pieces are the ones that are shocking. Like, you know, maybe it's in the material, but it's completely like, you know, different subject matter, different idea behind it, different, you know, that you would never have thought would have come together. And someone put them together and they juxtapose this amazing composition that it's just, wow, and then that inspires you, it builds off of that. So, yeah, no, I think it's actually better if it's not, you know, the standard. So I think it drives everyone for sure. Yep. Being the photographer that we weren't going to let in. I don't know. Being the photographer that we weren't going to let in.
I'm going to get sitting.
We are at 7 o'clock and we got started a little bit later, so we'll have a couple more minutes. And we've landed on some heavy things tonight, a lot of philosophy. So a quick throwaway that I do warn you is going to lead to something heavy before we're done. Sketchbooks. Do any of you participate a sketchbook? How do you keep track of ideas that aren't fully formed? What do you use?
I think a sketchbook's one of the most important things you can do. I hire a person on their sketchbook at Fisher-Price because it shows me that person could think with a pencil. And it wasn't finished work, but it was filled with concepts after exploration after exploration. And I'm a great believer in sketchbooks. And when I worked at Fisher-Price, you know, I sat into more marketing meetings than I ever wanted to ever sit in my life, believe me. But I would sketch throughout those things, and they would come up to me and say, "What did you draw? What did you draw? What did you draw?" You know, so it's kind of a stream of consciousness that happens. But it's an invaluable tool. I consider it an invaluable tool. And drawing after drawing after drawing, and you will go back and look. If you like, again, we talked about, well, maybe I'm challenged with an idea. Where do I go? If you got a lot of good sketchbooks you can page through those and say, wow, this one works beautifully for this. You're already in a ton of solutions sitting in front of you. And I think that's what your students, the sketchbook is paramount.
Yeah.
All artists and designers had sketchbooks all over.
I think it's funny, like Jerry would always pick on me because I'm a great collector of things, more like, so I will take pictures and collect pictures and write notes and you know, not really sketch anything until I've this giant pile of stuff and have solved this problem in my head and it's fully formed, and then I'll draw it. And Jerry would always be like, wait, where did that come from? Like, oh, well, that's my rumination that I've been like figuring it out. Whereas he's more of a,
I doodle in the margin. I don't sketch that well. But I do take pretty good notes when I'm glazing, which can inspire you years later when you look through your log or your log book, your firing book for the kiln, and say, oh, that was a great teapot, you know, circle with spout. But I remember that piece, the way I put the glaze on, and I used these 3 glazes. I sprayed this part, I dipped this part. That can inspire you